Hey everybody, Chris Sowers back again with another video review of a piece sent in by a reader. Here we go. Share my screen, get the piece up in front of us here. Hopefully you can see that okay. I'll blow it up just a little bit more. So today we're looking at a piece by Flora Morris Brown, the faux pas that gave me pause. And Flora, I blacked out your email there. If you want people to have it, go ahead and put it in the comments of this video. But here we go. The faux pas that gave me pause. I like that title. Faux pas, and pause. That works really nicely. Okay, here we go. Something was wrong. The congregation applauded, giving me a standing ovation. I am going to turn track changes on and I'm going to stick a comma in there. Congregation applauded, giving me a standing ovation. I returned to my seat next to the pastor's wife on the pulpit, tingling at the joy of seeing a sea of former classmates, teachers, and friends in the audience, and satisfied that my talk had been well received. All right, so right off the bat, I like how Flora starts this. What a great piece, or a great beginning. She sets up a little mystery with that first sentence. Something was wrong. Really powerful. Like, I dare you to stop reading there, right? You're definitely going to keep reading. And then she puts us right in scene. There's no context. There's no, I was so and so doing so and so, honored to be invited to speak. There's none of that. Save that for LinkedIn, right? She puts us right into scene, right into the moment. Really brilliantly done. And she trusts us. She respects us enough as her audience to figure out what's going on, right? She's doing us a favor, respecting our intelligence, and just dropping us in scene and letting us figure it out. I love this beginning, Flora. Brilliant. I returned to my seat next to the pastor's wife on the pulpit, tingling at the joy of seeing a sea of former classmates, comma, teachers. I am always going to put in the Oxford comma. If you're not an Oxford comma disciple, I'm sorry. I'm always going to put it in. Classmates, teachers, and friends in the audience, and satisfied that my talk had been well received. Just think about how much we know now. And she didn't tell us anything. She just showed us. It's so well done. The mistress of ceremonies stepped up to the podium to congratulate me as the Women's Day speaker and then turned to the pastor's wife. Okay, now she lets a little context unfold with this paragraph, right? We know it's Women's Day. We know she was the speaker. Okay, she must be somebody of some importance to be invited to this ceremony to speak on Women's Day. All right, but she didn't tell us any of that. She just showed us. It's so cool. As the Women's Day speaker turned to the pastor's wife, do you have any closing words, Mrs. Huntley? She motioned. I'm assuming this is Mrs. Huntley, but that's a little confusing, right? I might just go ahead and say Mrs. Huntley motioned no, jerking her head left and right, lips pursed without uttering a word. Okay, again, really brilliant showing versus telling, right? The telling version of this was Mrs. Huntley was clearly upset, or something along those lines. She respects us as her reader to just show us what's going on and let us figure it out. Brilliant. 17 years had passed since I had been back to my childhood church after moving to California, but I could still read her body language. It's so fantastic, Laura, how you let this context unfold over the course of the narrative. When you start a sentence, don't use numbers, use words. Okay, I don't know what that's doing to the text here, but that's weird. Sorry about that. We're gonna just have to put up with that. But think of what the telling version of this could have been. Okay, in the hands of a lesser writer, here's how this piece starts. It had been 17 years since I had been back to my childhood church after moving to California. I found myself invited to speak on Women's Day, right? Again, save it for LinkedIn. This is brilliant narrative. So well done. Let the context unfold. This is such a good example of something I've talked about before. Let the context unfold as you go through the narrative. She was displeased. I couldn't figure out why. Now, this is okay because it's okay to tell us that now because you've already done such a great job showing it. All right? Close that loop. She was displeased. I couldn't figure out why. Perfect. I had just received my PhD. So I think we need another period there. I think. I'm not a PhD, but I think that's what we do. I had just received my PhD, so I was clearly invited as the hometown kid makes good of that year. Okay. Again, just in the hands of a lesser writer, all of this context would have been in an introductory paragraph, right? And instead, Flora does such a wonderful job with this. Um, I haven't read this before, by the way. You're getting like raw reaction, how much I like this. So I'm sorry if I'm a little over the top, but that's how much I like it. I was 8 years old. Um, so just in this would be okay, in social media or something like that. But in AP style writing, we use words if it's less than if it's 10 or less. If it's more than 10, you can use the numerals and always use words when you're starting a sentence with a number. Okay. I was 8 years old when I was 8 years old when fancying herself. Okay, we need a comma here to set it apart because it seems like you're talking about yourself and this gets all kind of twisted up. So I was 8 years old when, fancying herself a songwriter and musical director, the pastor's wife formed the first ever children's choir in St. Louis, Missouri, named it the Treblets, and recruited my mother to be the accompanist. My two youngest sisters and I were automatically members, and along with over we you don't need both the over and the plus. I'm going to get rid of the plus. You can get rid of either one. And along with over 20 other youngsters, astonished audiences and congregations by performing not just the typical religious songs, but also anthems like Handel's Messiah. I'm going to stick a comma in here just for readability. I don't know that you officially need it, but this is starting to get long and I just wanted to break it up. I don't think it needs to be two sentences. I actually like it as one. My two youngest sisters and I were automatically members, and along with 20 other youngsters, astonished audiences and congregations by performing not just the typical religious songs, but also anthems like Handel's Messiah. It works really well. So this is an example of what a great writer can do with a long sentence. It doesn't seem like that long a sentence when I read it out loud, does it? But it really is. But the way she words things makes it work. My mind flashed back to the many choir practices when my mother taught us songs measure by measure, memorizing the words and music, while Mrs. Huntley and her husband were frequently traveling to domestic and foreign destinations as special guests of other churches, conferences, etc. I'm not sure if we need something just ahead of this because, see, this paragraph takes us back in time. So you've already flashed us back. So this is kind of confusing. Like, I don't know, are you flashing back from your flashback? Or I don't quite know if we need that. I might just say, I'm just going to make a suggestion and say, check this out. Many choir practices My mother taught us the songs measure by measure, memorizing the words and music. Well, memorize, encouraging us to memorize, right? Because now, yeah, the sentence doesn't quite work. Even in the original, my mind flashed back to the many choir practices. My mother taught us the songs because your mom's not memorizing the words and music, encouraging us to memorize, helping us memorize, something like that. I'm going to make that change. These are just suggestions, by the way. Helping us memorize the words and music while Mrs. Huntley and her husband. See, because I don't think you need that. We're already flashed back, so that telling us that you're flashing back is a little confusing. Okay, and now snap, we're back in the present. What could she be upset about all these decades later? When we dispersed to go to the dinner prepared for me and the congregation, looks like we've got one too many spaces in there. Yep. When we dispersed to go to the dinner prepared for me and the congregation in the educational building, I pushed it out of my mind and just focused on greeting and catching up with many friends, some of whom were no longer members of that church. Unnecessary detail that makes this sentence a little more complicated than it needs to be. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where it was at. Um, and then take us, like, we just need something to anchor this next bit. After dinner, I returned to Los Angeles. See, we need something that anchors that in time. I returned to Los Angeles, eager to share with my mother how much I enjoyed delivering the speech and connecting with friends. Mrs. Huntley called me. Uh-oh, my mother said. Really? That's great, I returned. She said she was very hurt that you didn't mention the treblets in your speech, my mother continued. Oh, I like how this comes full circle now. Yeah, see how it's tying this all together? My mother continued. What? Now it was my turn to be upset. After all the years since we had moved from St. Louis, I didn't recall that Mrs. Huntley had stayed in touch with my mother, and yet she called her to smear her dissatisfaction about what she considered a slight and a talk. I was a 34-year-old woman, not a little girl. I like this. Like, I can feel the indignation. I can sense the indignation. Ew, now I was mad. And yeah, nice job with a nice mixture of showing and telling there, and you're getting away with it. So well done. She had plenty of opportunity to voice her feelings at that service on Women's Day. After all, she was the pastor's wife, and if she was mature enough, could have pointed out could have pointed out without ruining the mood of the day that I had failed to mention the part that the children's choir played in my development and success in life. I'm guessing that's what she craved. Okay. There's a lot going on here. And it gets a little twisted in on itself. After all, she was the pastor's wife, and if she was mature enough, uh, after all, she was the. So I think the point that she was the pastor's wife ties in with the previous sentence, right? She would have plenty of opportunity to voice her feelings. I mean, come on, she's the pastor's wife. So let's leave that sentence alone. After all, she was the pastor's wife. And then I think I'd take out this dig. This is a dig. You don't need it. Um, and I think I'd start this with just without. So without ruining the mood of the day, she could have pointed out that I'd failed to mention. I'd say my failure to mention. I'm just wordsmithing now. Flora, you're a good enough writer, a great enough writer that you could do this. You don't need me doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. She could have pointed out my failure to mention the part that the children's choir played in my development and success in life. I'm guessing that's what she craved. I'm okay with that. I don't know that you need that parenthetical. Um, statement there. I'm okay with it. Period does go on the outside of the parentheses though. So I'd fix that if you're going to keep this. Up to you whether to keep it or not. Instead, she called my mother long distance as if I was a little girl who had misbehaved. As soon as I hung up, right? Hung up. As soon as I hung up, I don't think we know who you're talking to. We don't need that. As soon as I hung up, I called Mrs. Huntley, ready to be quite, get rid of one of those periods. I called Mrs. Huntley, ready to be quite vocal about what I thought about her behavior. A few expletives were lining up in my head to join in the tirade. Yes, even to the preacher's wife. It's really good. Really, really good. Her phone rang and rang. It's just as well they didn't own an answering machine. An answering machine. Yeah, or else my upset would have been immortalized. Or else my upset would have been immortalized. That's okay. I don't care for that word there. Or else my upset. I don't think we typically use upset as a noun like that. I think I would just say, or else my emotions would have been immortalized. I eventually hung up, but I was still steaming. A faux pas indeed. That was 45 years ago. Thankfully, I'm over it now. A cute ending. I'm like waiting for this big confrontation and you to learn your lesson from Mrs. Huntley about something. Um, and I think the lesson is just you're kind of lucky that, like you said, you're lucky that they didn't have an answering machine, so you could let her have it, and they could have that recording forever. Um, anyway, great piece. Really well done, Flora. That's my review. Some suggestions here for you, but outstanding writer. I think this is such a great example of the adage to show, not tell, and then also a great example of letting context unfold over the course of the narrative. So, really well done. And all right, that's it for today. Hope to see y'all soon in the next video. Thank you.